guys, it's Will. It's Hong Kong Cinema Appreciation Society. Welcome back to the channel. I'm here today to talk to you once again. I'm looking for the thing I'm trying to show you about Wong Kar-wai, the world of Wong Kar-wai, the Criterion set, which I have right here, and also right here, the angel and the devil on my shoulder. And more specifically, I'm going to be talking about Fallen Angels and Chungking Express. These films were released. Chungking came out in 1994. They're both written and directed by Wong Kar-wai. Chungking stars Takeshi Kaneshiro, Bridget Lin, Tony Leung, and Faye Wong. And Fallen Angels stars Leon Lai, Michelle Reese, Charlie Young, Karen Mok, and Takeshi Kaneshiro again. They were both shot by Chris Doyle, except for the first segment in Chungking Express, which was shot by Andrew Lau, who also shot As Tears Go By, the first Wong Kar-wai film. And the reason I'm talking about these films together is that Fallen Angels was originally supposed to be part of Chungking Express. It was going to be one of the stories in that film, and Wong Kar-wai decided it was too much for one film, and he split them up. And then instead of making a direct sequel or continuation of the story, basically what he said in interviews is that he wanted to make the inverse version of Chungking Express. So there's a lot to compare between these two films, and I've broken my little comparison up into a couple of sections to help make it a little bit easier for me to manage. The sections are character and world, tone and theme, and those ones will probably kind of blend together because there's a lot of similarities between kind of discussing those things. And by similarities, I mean there's a lot of overlap when you talk about those things, and then also genre and influence. So to begin with character and world, the world of Chungking Express is a very busy world. It's a world of this teeming, dense, multicultural city where there's constant life and activity. And it's, people in this just crazy, chaotic world looking for connections, kind of. And Fallen Angels is an almost completely empty world. The whole movie takes place at night. A lot of Chungking Express, especially the parts that are really well known, which I think is particularly the Tony Leung and Faye Wong stuff, takes place during the day. So you have this very obvious night and day thing, which is a theme that I think is reflected across the films in terms of their tone and stuff like that, which I will get to in a second here. But the world of Fallen Angels is very empty, and it's very isolated, and it's very alien, and it's almost like a sci-fi movie. And I can't say for sure whether or not Wong Kar-wai was directly influenced by sci-fi, but when I think of Fallen Angels in terms of tone, I think of stuff like Solaris. Whereas when I think of Chungking Express, I think of, like romantic comedies and other kind of stuff like that. So there's this very clear difference in the world that these characters inhabit. Now, to talk about the characters, the most obvious place to start, I think, is Takeshi Kaneshiro, because he's in both of these films. In Chungking Express, Takeshi Kaneshiro's character is a cop. And he's just broken up with someone, and he's really yearning he wants to get back together with that person, basically. He's still in love with them. And he's buying these cans of pineapples. This is something that's very famous from this movie, right? He's buying these cans of pineapples because they have an expiration date. And his theory is that if he gets to the expiration date, which is May 1st, right? And the person who has broken up with him, their name is May, and there's all these kind of things built around May as like a theme, right? If he gets to May 1st and these pineapples are expiring, he knows that means that it's time to break up with this person, right? Or not that it's time to break up with this person, but that's kind of the resolution. There's finality there. It's not going to happen, and he has to move on, right? And so he's kind of a lovelorn police officer pining for someone and trying to get past that and to find new love in his life, right? In Fallen Angels, the Takeshi Kaneshiro character is a thief. And right away you see like a big difference there, right? And he is mute. And the reason he's mute is because when he was a kid, he ate a can of bad pineapples and it made him mute. So there's obviously like a dialogue between these films, right? And Wong Kar-wai has said in interviews that the reason he made the Takeshi Kaneshiro character mute is that Takeshi Kaneshiro has really good comedic timing. And he thought it would be an interesting challenge for him not to have to speak. So you have this kind of dichotomy between this lovelorn cop who's very funny and, is kind of sees these pineapples as this symbol of like, okay, it's time to move on. And this other one who doesn't talk, who's a thief, who is the way he is in part because of expired pineapples, right? So it's this kind of, you see a very clear dialogue and a mirror image there. And then when you look at the Tony Leung character, again, he's a cop. And I think that you could parallel that story because in Chungking Express, you have Tony Leung and Faye Wong, right? And Tony Leung is a cop, and he's just broken up with someone, and kind of like the Takeshi Kaneshiro character. And it was a really great relationship for him, but it's over, and he's looking to move on and find someone new. And the Faye Wong character sees the sadness in him. She falls in love with him basically, right? But she wants to try to help him, so she breaks into his apartment and like cleans it and tidies it, and like does like leaves her CD there for him to listen to, and like she puts sleeping pills in his alcohol so that he can fall asleep instead of just drink himself into oblivion and like have peaceful rest and stuff like this. In Fallen Angels, the Leon Lai character, as an exact mirror image of the Tony Leung character, is a hitman, so he's paid to kill people, right? And he exists in this very shadowy, isolated kind of place psychologically, and I'll talk more about that later on in this video. But the Michelle Reese character is the person who kind of helps him set up his kills and helps him get like, the hotel rooms that he stays in and the maps of the places where he's going to do his job, kill people basically. And she, in a way, is very similar to the Faye Wong character in Chungking Express, because in the same way that the Faye Wong character falls in love with the Tony Leung character and breaks into his house, right, and like tidies up and stuff like that, the Michelle Reese character is going into these places where the Leon Lai character lives and inhabits and cleaning up after him and setting things up for him and trying to make it nicer for him. And she falls in love with him in the same way that Faye Wong falls in love with the Tony Leung character. But what you see that's really, really different, this is where you start to see the true like bifurcation of these films, is that in Chungking Express, and I think this is true of all the characters, and I should also say Bridget Lin in Chungking Express, she's involved in like drug running, but she's in love with this guy and he betrays her. And so it's her process of coming to terms with that, dealing with that, and moving on. And I think in that you see a lot of these themes in Chungking of something bad has happened to these people and they're in this crazy teeming city and they're trying to find love and they've been betrayed and they're trying to move on basically, and they're trying to find a new positive space to inhabit. And in Fallen Angels, you have this completely alien world that's totally empty and meaningless and devoid of life, where people just go around murdering people, and like there's a lot of violence in Fallen Angels. It's a very violent movie. There's lots of killing and fighting and blood and people who live in this world that's constantly on the precipice of like falling apart basically, whereas Chungking is like this constant coming together of all of these elements. And in the Faye Wong character, you see romantic love and yearning for Tony Leung. In the Michelle Reese character, what you see is extreme loneliness that erupts basically in extreme horniness. There's like multiple scenes of her masturbating, and she's thinking about this Leon Lai character. And Fallen Angels is a very sexual movie too, and the violence and the sex, I think, are part of one another. And what they are is they are the eruptions of these characters who have no other way to express themselves and no outlet or escape from this isolation and loneliness that they feel. And, with the Takeshi Kaneshiro character, his mom died when he was young, and that was traumatizing for him. And then he moved to Hong Kong. He's not originally from Hong Kong, and he doesn't speak. And so he inhabits this very lonely, isolated world. And the way that he kind of gets his yayas out instead of the sex and the violence is that he breaks into people's businesses during the night when they're closed and runs them, and like tries to he kidnaps this family in an ice cream truck and drives them around and makes them eat all this ice cream, and it's very weird and funny. But I think that you see this very clear split between these characters who are yearning for something and hoping to find it and believe they will find it and are trying to heal, and these characters who are so far beyond the point of yearning for something positive or searching to heal that they seek solace in like these eruptions of violent emotions through like horniness, sex, and killing. And so and I think that a lot of that ties into, like I said, it's going to be hard to extricate character and world and tone and theme. And I think that kind of encapsulates the character, the world, the tone, and the theme. I do also want to touch upon, though, the title of Fallen Angels. A fallen angel is someone who comes from a place of warmth and light and beauty, right? And falls out of that into a place of darkness and isolation and loneliness, and knows that other world exists and wants to get back to it, but there may not be any path back to it. And when they fall into a world of chaos and violence and all these other things, right? And Adam and Eve, of course, are fallen people with sex and and there's a lot of sex and violence associated with the notion of a fallen angel, right? And you see that in each of these characters, like the Leon Lai character, who there's a really, really incredible scene in Fallen Angels, which I will talk more about later, but where the Leon Lai character meets some guy he grew up with, and just randomly on a bus. And you see that he has a backstory. He's not like this character who exists in isolation, but he comes from somewhere, and he has come to this place of violence. And he says in that scene, I wish I could go to a wedding someday. It's like in a voiceover. The guy invites him to his wedding, and in the voiceover he says, I've always wanted to go to a wedding. So you see that this is someone who wants a sense of belonging and is seeking for a family, but has no way of finding it, and so exists in this world of chaos and violence. And I think that's, in Chungking, it's a world teeming with all these people, but it's not a world of chaos and violence. It's a world of trying to find a place in the midst of those masses. So now, to talk about genre and influence, to me, Fallen Angels is a film where Wong Kar-wai really just lets himself go, and he moves beyond any clear, obvious, deliberate references into a completely unique and original space. That film is completely his, and whereas with and you do see with both of these films, you see a lot of influence of Godard and Truffaut and the French New Wave, and I think it's really interesting that you could very easily make the comparison that if Chungking Express is kind of like Breathless, and that it's this very playful film where criminality is taken kind of lightly, and it's about romance and love and sex and these things, Fallen Angels is kind of like La Petite Soldat, which is Godard's second film, which is kind of the inverse image of Breathless, in that it's a similar kind of character wandering through a similar kind of place, but it's a urban prison of the mind, and it's a place of violence and threat and cynicism that the person can't escape from, rather than a place of romance that the person is inhabiting, and that seems to be very much happening with these two films too. But when you look at Chungking Express, you see the influence of romantic comedies very clearly, and you see the influence of like just kind of screwball, kind of the whole tradition of screwball romantic comedies, going all the way back to like It Happened One Night, Bringing Up Baby, those types of movies, and then coming through the stuff in the 80s and 90s, and then also the kind of the comedic, lighthearted, self-aware kind of meta criminal stuff that Godard was doing in the 60s. And you see a lot of influence in the editing from Godard in both of these films, actually. But in Fallen Angels, I see this influence of like almost like Tarkovsky. And it reminds me of Gaspar Noé. And I know Gaspar Noé started making films much later than Wong Kar-wai, so I don't think he clearly wasn't an influence on him. But Gaspar Noé does this kind of like very pure sensual cinema where it's about sounds and light and abstraction, and it's sexual and it's violent, and it's not necessarily kind of hamstrung by the notion of narrative and story and character. It drifts and it becomes all of these different things, and the form is very loose but also very committed to the unique form of cinema. And I see that in Fallen Angels. Like, there are segments in Fallen Angels that are totally abstract. It's totally abstract imagery, and you see a sense of trying to get intimacy in both of these films, these very wide angle lenses where the camera is right against the characters, but they push that to an extreme in Fallen Angels where it's both extremely intimate and almost disorienting and otherworldly, where it has this very sci-fi kind of thing. Like I said, in Tarkovsky, you look at like Stalker and Solaris, but even with films like The Sacrifice and stuff, where it's this very like loose, floating, beautiful camera and voiceovers and abstract philosophical discussions and stuff tied into genre cinema. In a way, I almost feel like Wong Kar-wai is making like this meta pure cinema examination of heroic bloodshed films, because you have the Leon Lai character who is very much like a hero of a heroic bloodshed film, but instead of it being about whatever mission he's on or whatever the plot is or whatever his going around killing all these people, even though we do see lots of scenes of violence in this movie, it's about his internal struggle and his sex life and the loneliness of his world. But also, like I said, there's that scene on the bus, right? And in all of these heroic bloodshed movies, it's about the character in the place at the time, right? And they're almost like absolutes. They're fully formed and you exist with them in that space. In this, you see this guy comes from somewhere, and he was a child. He says everyone was a child at some point. Like, he grew up somewhere. He knows people. Like, he's not just this abstract figure in a movie. There is this other thing going on there, and so it's like a meta look at the heroic bloodshed genre, and it's but again there's an indulgent indulgence in pure cinema and pure sensual cinema. And it's this film that really, like I said, Godard is very clearly there, as in with Chungking Express. But Chungking Express is very like, and again, when you look at the editing, Chungking Express is like, here's the first section of the movie, which is Takeshi Kaneshiro and Bridget Lin. And then here's the second section of the movie. And the characters do overlap and they exist in the same world, but it's two separate stories. And in Fallen Angels, the editing, I think, takes it further than that. And it's very jarring, and you bounce between these sections. And like the Michelle Reese character lives in the same hotel as the Takeshi Kaneshiro character, and they actually know each other. So again, you have this novelistic thing, right? The whole thing you could almost look at as this huge novel of like night and day. First half of the novel, second half of the novel, because it's about this city and these people who inhabit it, but they inhabit it in very different spheres and in very different ways. And I really loved watching both of these films back to back. It was really enlightening. I had never seen them so close to one another before, with such a deliberate kind of mind frame of how do they relate to one another. So I'm talking about Chungking Express, released in 1994, written and directed by Wong Kar-wai, and I'm talking about Fallen Angels, released in 1995, also written and directed by Wong Kar-wai. My name is Will. This is Hong Kong Cinema Appreciation Society. Drop in the comments what your thoughts are on these films and how they relate to one another. I'd be very interested in hearing that. I am just going to check my notes to make sure I didn't leave anything out, because I took a butt ton of notes on this. But and they're all very young people too, actually. I think that's worth noting, because all the actors were, with the exception of Tony Leung, all of the actors were in their early to mid-20s when these films were made, and you definitely see this kind of young person's world of extreme emotions and loneliness, and how it's going to turn you into the person you end up becoming as you get older, which is in Days of Being Wild too. The way that experience and your family and all these things turn you into the adult you become. It's interesting, and it's interesting that you can trace. You got to take Ashes of Time out of the equation, though, which is, it's tough. But like, if you look at As Tears Go By, Days of Being Wild, Chungking, Fallen Angels, you trace this path of growing up, and it's almost like this meta arc that exists within these films. And he's dealing with young people and all of their problems and their romantic yearning and sexual yearning and the world that they live in and the violence and all this stuff. So my name is Will. It's Hong Kong Cinema Appreciation Society. Again, I thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time.